Well, happy day to you, friends. Sorry I missed you yesterday, but it's kind of been a crazy week. Lots of stuff going on with the children, and I just couldn't get my stuff together yesterday. But today is the first day that you can plant some of your spring and summer crops, so I definitely wanted to hop on here today and chat with you about some of my best tips that I've found for finally being successful with planting things from seed. So I'm going to take you through those tips, and I'm also going to chat with you just a little bit about starting seeds indoors. Anymore, I just do mine outside. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But the things that I talk about in the very beginning are going to be relative to you, whether you do it inside or outside. So let's go check that out. By far, one of the biggest things that made a huge difference in my life as a person trying to start seeds are flood trays. And I get these in like a pack of 10 or 20. Like a lot of things, I over ordered them last time, and so I have a super ton of them. This one looks like it has a leak in it, but it's not a leak enough that keeps the plants from getting water. So I love flood trays. I love that anything can become a flood tray. And I want you to take special note about this right here. I'm going to talk about this in a second. But this right here could be just as good of a flood tray as a flood tray that you'd get off of Amazon. You just want some type of container. You could even use like a take-home lettuce container. That's like clear and plastic, just anything that will hold water in the bottom. And then the cool thing about using flood trays is you can then use anything or plant in anything. Like these are cups from the nursery. These are from some of my 6-packs. This obviously is a big 1-gallon container that I have. That's from some store. These are all recycled. And these, of course, are Solo cups. So as long as your seedling has got holes in it some way, it will do excellent in a flood tray. And I could give you exacts about, how much to fill your flood tray, but I usually just pay attention to where it comes up to on the highest container in the bin, and that's how much I fill it. And then I pay attention, and you can see like this one right here is just kind of starting to get dry on top, where the rest of its friends are pretty moist. So when one more of these looks a little dry on the top like that one, that's when the tray will get flooded again. And for the most part, by keeping it just kind of up about that far where it goes a little bit above the containers but gives them plenty of room to suck in the fluid, then that just works for me. And the great thing about it is I'm never overwatering and I'm never underwatering. And because I'm not watering on top, I'm not constantly putting my seedlings through this dampening thing that eventually will just kill the seedling. And by forcing the plant to feed from the bottom and drink from the bottom, then it causes the root system to be substantially stronger. Because again, if you're just barely putting a little bit of water here on the top of your seedling at any given time, then the roots are going to have more of a tendency to come up to the top of the soil chasing that moisture than they are going down to the bottom, which is actually where you want them to go. So I love flood trays. I love that you can use all different kinds, and I love that any little container that you can put holes in, see our holes around there, becomes something that you can grow in and use in a flood tray. Over the last couple years, and I've even got some videos that are contradictory to what I'm about to tell you, but I've watched all these different videos about seed starter mixes, how to make a seed starter mix, and what has really become more successful for me than any of those notions is just using the exact same soil that I make and put into my grow bags, which is, a combination of equal parts of compost, of peat moss, and vermiculite. And I had a little bit of perlite that I needed to dispose of before we moved and didn't want to carry a little bitty bag. So some of that's in there. So this is a huge tip, I feel like, is
if you're not having success with seed starters, just use your own soil mix. Use whatever that mix is, and if it's something out of a bag, then add some compost to it. Because what I've also found from doing it this way is not only is it real easy for my plants or my seedlings to grow through it, it's also automatically got food on site that's not harsh, that's not strong, in the form of compost, that's going to start feeding that plant immediately. So if I could tell you anything, it's like, forget all the seed starter mixes and just use what your plants do well in now, and if you need to boost it with compost, do that. The next thing that I found super success with is what I'd say how I charge my soil. So these trays have actually been charged a couple times, not with the same way I'm going to do it right here. They've gotten wet, ready to take seeds, but obviously I didn't get planted in them. So what I do when I'm getting like if I've filled up cups or whatever from down here, the way I'm going to charge that soil is with seaweed extract, and I get this at Summer Winds, of course, and I would say I probably use, a tablespoon or two to, I don't know, a half gallon, a half of whatever this picture is, and I just give it a stir. And this is actually going to be enough for probably 2 trays and some lucky plant that I decide to give it to. So again, I'll just kind of show you. I'm going to put enough in here that it's going to get those ridges in there covered up. Let me give it a second so we can see where it settles. So now you can see that the water is touching just barely the bottoms of those. So I'm going to give it a little bit more so that it comes up kind of more up to the sides of the thing, and then you can just pop your container back in there, and that's as hard as it gets in terms of working with a flood tray. Now the other thing that I've really so another thing before I say go any further is, if you're growing inside, you probably don't want to use something like kelp or seaweed or fish emulsion to fertilize your trays. But that's a big thing that has been a change for me. Besides charging and immediately getting the seeds going in the seaweed extract, at least once or twice a week, I'm putting some more of this back into the flood tray. So between the compost in my soil mix and this regular cycles of this, I just have gotten really great, so much better success than I've had in the past. Now, as I mentioned, inside, you probably don't want to smell those smells. So I would just say go with a simple low grade fertilizer that's liquid. So you see, this is like a 0.10 O and a 0.44, so it's real light. It's not something that's going to burn the seedlings, but it's going to kind of constantly give them a little bit to go on. Now, whatever, depending on how deep something's got to be, I've got to use this like little nurser that we got when we were trying to save something. So I'll drop my seed in there, and another thing that's got me great success is, instead of trying to cover that up, I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of coarse vermiculite on the top of it, and that's going to hold in the soil. That's going to hold the seed in. That's going to hold some moisture around it. And if for some reason I were to splash the top of these trays, then it's not automatically going to cause erosion with the soil, because that's going to keep the seed intact in the hole, and everything is going to be good. So, vermiculite, seaweed extract, use your own soil, and figure out some way to create a flood tray if you don't want to buy flood trays for yourself.
So if you run into a situation where you're just not getting the germination that you expect, it's really, really important, and I've talked about this in other videos, it's really important to remember that warmth equals germination rate. So if it's really cold outside, like for me today, it's really cold. It's probably only going to be like in the 50s today. And 50 and below is not a very fast, or in some cases even effective germination rate. 60 and above are kind of like the happy zones. And that's not to say that you can't germinate at other temperatures. It just can be a lot slower. I'm gonna be working on peppers. And peppers, I hear people all the time talk about how long it takes for peppers to come up and how difficult it is to get peppers to come up. And this seed company that I just ordered from is an exclusively pepper seed company, and everywhere, all over your order, they remind you over and over that it can take up to 4 to 6 weeks or more for pepper seeds to germinate and come up. And all of that, again, is determined by warmth. So if you're outside, of course, ideally the best spot would be your greenhouse. But if you're not in a greenhouse situation, then if you remember that tray that I showed you, that you could use as a stand-in for a flood tray, and the lid that goes on there, that I pointed that out to you and told you I'd talk about that later. That setup right there would be a really easy, basic kind of greenhouse outdoor situation, because you could put that plastic dome on top of that aluminum container, and for most of the day it's going to be really warm inside of that container. There might be even days where it gets back up into the 70s, and you wouldn't want to take that lid off. Now, if you're growing indoors, if you're like me and you don't turn your heat on, your house is probably chilly, and if you do turn your heat on, you still might not have the ideal temperature for germination. So you're probably going to want to get a heat mat. And the tough thing about heat mats is not all of them are as reliable as we'd like them to be. I haven't found a lot of success with heat mats, so you might want to do some extra research on people that have had good success. And this is also after me doing a lot of research and reading a lot of reviews. I just could never get any kind of consistency that would make me want to invest in a heat mat. But you're probably going to need one if they're not in a warm room, or a warm that's above 70 degrees or better. Okay. Now inside, you're going to need a light, and obviously a little bit of space. Now, the tough thing about getting a light for indoors, or even speculating about growing indoors, is the light part. It's because there's so much information out there about lights, and most of that information actually has to do with growing that one medicinal herb that a lot of people tend to grow indoors. And that type of plant, grown from seed to finish, does need specific kind of lights. I've got a video I did before on lights. I'm going to put a link down below to that. It's just like I think a $25 light that I got at Walmart. And that type of light is perfect for growing seedlings. It's not going to be perfect for the long-term life of that medical plant that everybody wants to grow, or for recreation use. But it's not going to be effective for something like that long term. It won't even be effective for a tomato long term, but it'll be really great for a seedling and a sproutling and all those things up until you're ready to move it out. It's not going to get it into creating flowers or fruit or anything like that, but it will be very, very handy for what you're wanting to do indoors. And with those lights, you want to make sure, because especially if you're using fluorescent tubes, they're not hot. So you want to get that light as close to your seedlings as possible, to keep them from stretching the way that they would probably if you put them in just like a window in your house. More than anything with lights, I just really want you to bear in mind to keep it simple, and not get lost in all the research and information that has to do with growing medical plants, or plants that one would be trying to grow all the way through their entire life cycle inside. And something else to remember if you're going to grow inside is that you're going to need to plan for a hardening off. So whenever you're planning on putting your garden out, 2 weeks before that is when you need to start kind of baby stepping that plant outside into the shade, a little bit each day until it can handle direct sun, and then go plant it where you're meant to have it in your yard. Now again, for us outside, the reason why I love doing it outside is because I don't have to harden anything off. In the summer, I don't grow seedlings in the greenhouse. I just set them right outside wherever I can find a spot for them. But I've got the heat working on my side. I put them in the greenhouse now to give them extra warmth, extra boost of heat that they can build up during the day, that they can hold overnight and get into their growth cycles. But again, remember, if you don't have a greenhouse, you can still get any kind of tray and put one of those plastic covers on it. You can use a lot of different things, like a takeaway plastic clear
clear plastic salad container to create your own mini greenhouses out there, as well as like making little greenhouses out of the, you know, a Coke bottle or a soda bottle with the bottom cut off of it. Okay, so warmth equals germination rate. So remember that. Remember, if you don't have warmth that's at least getting your seedlings above 60 degrees, you got to find some warmth for them. Well, I hope that you found that helpful, and I've got some other little videos that I've already kind of done first part, second part on that I'm going to be feeding to you soon. So please forgive me for not being with you tomorrow. I hope that you're excited about getting planted today here on the 15th of the month, and I hope you have the best day ever.